no one would pitch. And like, I imagine like two people in like cricket. So thank you. So this thing about what's in my heart has been giving me sleepless nights, right? So when Krista and I actually had this conversation, she left my office, and I frantically called up my teammate Lee, and I was like, you need to come over, like, right away. And then he rushes in, he's like, what's wrong? I'm like, close the door. And he's like, what is it? He's thinking like something is burning. And I'm like, well, I told him what we just discussed, and I'm like, well, she wants me to talk about what's in my heart, but I have nothing in my heart. And he's like, I know. What are you going to do? And I think that was mean. But it was also a challenge, because I thought, my goodness, if my closest colleague thinks I have nothing in my heart, I need to dig deep. But also it shows the kind of people I work with, because ordinary people would have been like, no, but it wasn't. So this is a different talk for me. I don't normally do these kind of talks where I share something about me and my story, so bear with me. So before I start, I have good news and bad news. Which should I start with? Oh, the bad, okay. So... So the bad news is you're probably going to want a stiff drink after this talk. The good news is that I have vodka for all of you. Look under your chairs. There's nothing there, guys. This is a place of business. So no, there's nothing for you. But I'm going to try, even though it is a fairly serious topic, because it's something that I've been wondering about and a journey that I'm still on that I would actually like your help with. I am going to try and keep it a little bit interactive to the extent that I can. Okay. So the topic of today's discussion is, are you a ghost in the workplace? Are you a ghost? So I've been getting a lot of questions about, what is this about? And through these questions, I've realized that ghosting means very different things to different people. So, some of the younger members of our audience think ghosting is that situation where you like a guy, you're texting, and then he quickly ghosts and you never hear from him again. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the spooky kind, the kind of Casper the Friendly Ghost, if you will. I'm talking about those of us who are essentially unfulfilled at work, those of us who are here but may as well not be, those of us who were once vibrant and full of energy but have lost that spark. And I think we all get there at one point or another, when we were fresh, bouncy, juicy grapes but are now dying on the vine at work, essentially dying while we're still alive. And that's the topic of today's discussion. So as I mentioned, this is a topic that is close to my heart, because it highlights the outcomes of conversations that I had with my friends and mentors who are much wiser than I, not too long ago, a few months ago, in fact, where I was in a really, really dark place. I was asking myself very difficult questions, having an existential crisis, if you will. I was asking, I'd been in the workplace for over a decade, and you kind of just, you progress, but you keep asking yourself, well, what is this all about? Is this all there is? What am I created for? There must be something bigger. I think that there's a bigger contribution that I need to make to the world, and I just felt like I was in a rut. And the more I asked myself these questions, the deeper and deeper I sank into a well of disillusionment. So, in my conversations with friends, I would read books about finding your purpose, and I did all that. I watched a lot of TED Talks about finding yourself, finding your inner joy, etc. But it wasn't until I spoke to a friend of mine who is quite deep, and he referred me to a poem. Now, referring me to a poem is a very bold move, right? Because I'm like the first person who will make fun of people who read poems. If I see you doing yoga on the beach, I will laugh at you. I'm that person that I'm like, a poem, like, ugh. But anyways, I read it, just, because to be polite. But I was pleasantly surprised by the insight that I got, because it almost seemed to answer a lot of the questions that I was having. And I'd like to share that with you. So bear with me and don't roll your eyes. I see he was ready to roll his eyes. Okay. It goes like this. It's called Sweet Darkness by a famous author called David White. It says, when your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. It's time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. The dark will be your womb tonight, and the night will give you a horizon further than your eyes can see. You must learn one thing. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Sometimes it takes the darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn that anyone or anything that doesn't bring you alive is too small for you. So this, for me, I almost had like an emotional moment when I read it. I think it's largely because of where I was and the thoughts that I was having. And the first line really resonated with me, that when your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. And I found that was relevant for me. I found that the world was a dreary place because I was tired. And I was looking for all these external sources of inspiration, but I hadn't done the internal work. So what this was saying to me is that until you've done the work on yourself to find your own joy, there is no way that you can get it that is external of yourself. So it almost felt as though, because I had stopped paying attention to the world had stopped paying attention to me. And like God has taken his ball away because I'm not playing. And that's a soccer metaphor, and I don't watch sports, so I wanted to be inclusive. So you can't accuse me of not being inclusive. But essentially, what David White says further in the poem is that when you narrow your own perception, the breadth of life narrows, and so too do the possibilities. And I found that was largely where I was, that I wasn't present. I wasn't present in my own life, not at work, not at home, anywhere, and I was tired as a result. And what dawned on me is that when you are profoundly present, profound things can happen to you. And that's largely when I started to change my view, and my life, I must say, is a little bit better as a result. So, these insights kind of blew my mind. I realized that, all this is within me, blah, 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 but I was still tired. It doesn't change the fact that I still have these issues, I still have these questions, and how do I start to answer them? So it's one thing to recognize the cause of your exhaustion, but it's quite another to then say, well, how do you deal with it? How do you start to answer those questions? And that is where the second part of the poem comes in, which talks about the darkness and how you need to go into the darkness and how you need to be in your own confinement to then answer those questions for yourself. And so essentially it says that sometimes it takes that being alone to learn that anything or anyone that doesn't bring you alive is ultimately too small for you. So that for me was the big revelation. And, I know it sounds all spooky. I'm talking about ghosts, I'm talking about darkness. But essentially, in poetic tradition, I've learned darkness is a place of renewal, of the other life, where you are able to look at yourself as you truly are. So it's not about being spooky or not recruiting you into a cult or anything. It's really about being able to look at yourself as you truly are without the distractions of the world. And that is what I needed. And I think this was really, really difficult because I think a lot of us don't have the luxury of being able to get into those spaces and to have alone time and to truly, truly reflect. For me, it took a December holiday away where I was in Clarence in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't have to be that extreme for you. Some of you just have children or you don't have that luxury. But it's something that you do need to give to yourself because otherwise you will never get past that exhaustion. And I believe that, a lot of us are busy. right? So we're busy, we have deadlines to meet, we have budgets to meet, we have children to raise, etc. And in this busyness, we move at great speed. And speed isn't always a bad thing, because in the world that we live in and that we work in, speed is rewarded, speed is recognized. You are that efficient person. But ultimately, when we move through speed, we ultimately become visitors. And please tell me if I'm losing anyone, because I've since become very deep since, so you might not get it. Joke. So, essentially we move at great speed because we actually don't want to stop. I think a lot of us are afraid, I was afraid, of what we will find when we stop. We're scared that we probably won't survive the stopping. I found a lot of emptiness when I looked at myself. I thought I had a good life. I thought I had fabulous friends or whatever, but ultimately when I had to strip all of that, what I found there was something I wasn't ready for. It was me, warts and all. And I think a lot of us are afraid of that moment where we're confronted with our own true selves and who we really are and what is lacking in our lives. So essentially, and I remember before I actually went to Clarence, I had a chat with Maurice, and she was saying to me, yes, like you look really, like you're a bit off these days, like you're just a bit off. And it was weird that she said that, because I was still trying to hide it. I mean, I talk a lot of nonsense, like generally. I was still doing that. I was still rocking my red lips. So I was still like thinking I looked normal, but she picked it up and I was like, you know what, I'm just tired. And she said, well, maybe you just need a holiday, maybe you just need to rest. And I agreed, but I knew in my heart that no amount of rest would save that. I needed to be more wholehearted in what I was doing, because the cure for the kind of exhaustion that I had wasn't going to be found through resting and through a holiday. It was about being more wholehearted about my life and really asking myself the questions about, what is it that I need to do that is big enough for my spirit? Because I think ultimately we find ourselves trapped in the cycle of tiredness because what we do on a day-to-day basis has nothing to do. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm talking about things that we do at work, things that we do in life. They have nothing to do with your true superpowers and your contribution to the world and the critical milestones that you've reached in your own life. So you're ultimately half here, right? And you feel unfulfilled because you are this person, this multifaceted, multi-talented person with passions and dreams and talents, and you come here and this is what you do, and you spend a lot of your time here, and you're tired. So that is very understandable, and that's kind of what I found. But essentially, I think I understand that, we're all at work, we all have jobs to do, and I'm not saying that let's all go out there and quit our jobs and follow the circus or whatever your passion is. The questions that I was asking myself is, I like what I do. I like what I've chosen to do. How can I be more deliberate in bringing my full self to work, such that when I go home, I'm a fulfilled person? And this is a really, really important thing, because work is an integral part of who we are. It's a very, very important part of our lives. Whether it's here at AFGRI or anywhere else, work is something that we're stuck with. Not stuck with, that's a bad word. That we live along with, whatever. So work is part of who we are. And I came across an interesting quote about work when I was trying to look for different ways that people look at work and trying to kind of find perspective for this talk. And I came across a quote by a Russian author. And I developed a small obsession with Russia some time ago. I went there a few months ago, and I came back and was annoying everyone with all sorts of Russian catchphrases. And so I was very excited with this quote. But ultimately, what he says about work is this: if one wanted to crush and destroy a man, to mete him out the most terrible of punishments, all that one would have to do is make him do work that was completely and utterly devoid of usefulness and meaning. This is very deep because Russians are known for knowing how to punish people, okay? So if he says that the worst form of punishment and cruelty is not about twisting their nipples or beating them or whatever, he talks about making him do work that is meaningless. That really shows you how the spirit of a man is hugely broken by not being able to do what he deems to be meaningful and fulfilling in the things that he does every day. Okay, so essentially, I think I see a lot of heads nodding, and I think we all agree, right? We are here at work because I actually thought about, why are we here? Are we here for the money? Why do we work? Right? And I think a lot of us think, yes, we are here for the money. And if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. You probably would. Because even people with money do work. Work is a way of expressing ourselves and contributing to the planet that we live in, whether here or anywhere else. Right? That is just the reality. And interestingly, there's a study that found that once you start earning money that can cover your basic needs, you start looking for deeper things in life. So you start to trade up from money to meaning, and I believe that that's where a lot of us are. So yes, you think you're here for the money, but actually a lot of you have passed the point of working for money. You are looking for something bigger. You're looking for meaning. So that is ultimately the challenge that we have for ourselves today. Because even though we recognize this, we're very poor at, we do very poorly when it comes to intentionally trying to make that happen and taking responsibility for adding that meaning for our lives. So when I was, kind of reading and preparing for this talk, I was quite curious about what it is that workers are experiencing in this country. So how many people were feeling like how I was feeling? Was I alone in this? Because it's very difficult to go to colleagues and be like, are you empty inside? But you can Google it. So I did. And I started Googling and trying to find, are there other people like me? Are people asked? Because we don't talk about these things. And I came across a very interesting study from Gibbs, where I studied, and it surveyed employee engagement across hundreds of thousands of South African workers and tried to assess how engaged are people in the workplace? How happy do people feel that they have meaning? Can you guess what proportion of workers said that they were engaged? How many? Engaged. So disengaged. Too pessimistic. It's close, but that's close. It was 91%. So literally, only 9% of people surveyed said that they felt engaged and they felt they did meaningful work. The rest of us were just coming to work, going home, basically audiences in our own lives. That is what we're living. And that is where the majority of people are. They are ghosts in their workplaces. And we are all ghosts haunting each other in the hallways, and we don't even... No, we don't even know it, right? People are living very, very gray lives, and they smile on the surface, but inside we all know that this is not me living my life to the full. And you're waiting. You're waiting for retirement when you can finally travel. You're waiting to make your first million where you can start contributing to your community. You're waiting. And you're waiting and waiting, and somewhere the bed that you're going to die on is being manufactured in China, and you're waiting. And no, I'm just saying, like, this is how dark things got for me. I was thinking of all of this. I imagine this bed is probably like now in assembly, and like, and that's what you're doing. You're waiting for it, right? But there has to be a reason why so many of us are in this place. Why is it? Because it can't be that there's something wrong with all of us. So what's the reason? And I have a hypothesis, and I mean, It's not the only answer, but it's what I think. And you probably have different ideas as to what could possibly cause this. But I think it has to do with our industrial model of education, right? That almost forces us into specialization. So when you are in matric, you choose your life's path, but you don't have enough information about yourself, you don't have enough information about the future, and this is where you go. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with specialization. I think a lot of us can be proud of the fact that we are experts in our field of expertise, but the issue is you are a multifaceted person. Yes, you're an accountant, but you also are great at baking cupcakes, and you also have a heart for youth, and you also want to help the poor, and you are a multifaceted person that you are just not allowed to explore because you deem yourself as a specialist, and this is the path that you have chosen. And I think that's a big challenge. And the way the workplace is arranged in different streams of expertise also perpetuates this, right? So we have Jonathan at Unigrow, and so it becomes very difficult to then say, for him to then say, I actually have a heart for strategy. I'm just going to come and hover over Thabi and see what she does. So it's about thinking about ways of how to almost navigate this within the workplaces that we're given. What I'm not suggesting is that, in the example that I've given, I've just actually thought of, I'm not saying that suddenly an accountant should decide that they have a passion for drafting legal documents and then start doing that here. Because that is a crime waiting to happen. But what I am talking about is being more intentional. So for instance, for me, I have a heart for development. Yes, I'm an economist. Yes, I was trained in the numbers. And if you probably had to split my heart and literally look into my heart, Krista, you would probably wade through tons of chocolate and find numbers and graphs. So that's largely. But I also have a heart for development. And I had to literally craft time out for myself and have a very serious discussion with my boss and say, this is also what I'm passionate about. How do we incorporate this into the work that we do? How do we make space for this? And this is the contribution that I think my passions can bring to this business. And it was a very difficult discussion. It's not a discussion that we have often, but that was something that I felt that I needed for me to not die on the vine at work and almost throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, FGRI is not for me because I'm literally not bringing my full self to work and don't know the possibilities of what I can do if I did. And so that's largely what I had to do. So since realizing that, this is how I now live my life. And I know I'm giving a lot of quotes, but I've done a lot of Googling. And I'm going to share it with you. So it says, a master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he is doing and leaves others to wonder whether he's working or playing, right? To himself, he always seems to be doing both. And so when I walk around making fun of people in the corridor or whatever, to me, I'm still at work, but I can't leave that side of me at home. And so it's only when you start bringing that and bringing your full self to your colleagues that they start to wonder, well, does Thabi actually do any work? But that is you. That is who you are, and your work is getting done, but you are bringing that full self. And it's not about whether others think that you're working or not, because to you, it just seems like you're doing both. And that is living joyfully, even at work. Right? So I get that a lot of you are probably sitting here and thinking, well, yeah, but I hear what you're saying, but work doesn't define me. I'm not what I do. I have a good work-life balance, and work is here, but I have a fulfilling life outside of work. And I thought about this concept of a work-life balance. And being the economist that I am, I ran some numbers, right? And I took the number of days in a year. So you feel free to follow with me if you have a calculator, because I'm going to do some subtracting here. If you don't believe, it is pretty shocking. So the number of days in a year is what? 365, right? You spend 8 hours of those sleeping, hopefully. That's 122 days, right? That leaves you with 243 days of the year. You have 52 weekends, which now is 104 days, and that leaves 139 days in the year. Let's say you take 3 weeks of leave, as many of us should. That leaves what? That's 21 days. You're left with 118 days, right? And then you take public holidays. Let's say there's 12. That's 12 days. It leaves you with 106 days. And let's say you take an hour to shower, breakfast, getting ready for me, it's slightly more. But let's say you're that efficient person and it takes you an hour to get ready in the morning. That's 15 days that you spend on getting ready. So that leaves you with like 91 days. And then you spend an hour coming to work. That's 15 days. That's 76 days that you're now left with. And then you take an hour for lunch. That's 15 days. Now you're left with 61 days, right, of the 365 that you started with. And then let's say you take half an hour on coffee breaks, going to the bathroom on the days that you are at work. That's 7 days. Now you're left with 54. And then you spend an hour cooking dinner, doing whatever you do in the evenings. That's another 15 days. Now you're left with 39. And then you spend an hour watching TV or doing whatever, social media, etc. That leaves you with, that takes away about 15 days if you spend an hour a day doing that. Now you're left with 24 days. And then you spend an hour on phone calls, if you're me, to my mom, what are you wearing today? That sort of, let's say an hour, just chatting to friends, etc. That's another 15 days, and now we're down to 9 days, folks. And then you assume that you have half an hour a day of office chit-chat, or whatever, in the kitchen, small talk on the corridor. 7 days. Leaves you with 2 days. And then there's year-end functions, or whatever, things like this that we, that make us happy, etc. at work. Let's say they take up 2 days. Do you know how many hours there are left for work? 0. At 0, right? And it's shocking. Okay, I know that this is probably, there's something wrong with this calculation. But if you really subtract it, that is what you get, right? So if you literally compartmentalize your life like that, you have nothing left for work. So why is it that we think about this work-life balance and we compartmentalize, this is work, this is non-work? Because clearly, doing that is almost nonsensical, right? Because we know that we're here most of the time, but when you really look at it, there's no time for it. So it's weird, and I feel like it's this whip that we use to punish ourselves. That, I'm working too hard, so my life isn't in balance, or I'm living too hard, so my work isn't in balance. And I think this work-life thing becomes this myth that we feed ourselves. But ultimately, we have one self, and we have one life. We spend some of that life at work. We spend some of that life at home, but it's ultimately one life. So, like for instance, if you have a really, really crappy day at work, you don't go home and you're magically like, oh, that's done. And then you switch over to home, and now that's life. And then you don't have like a terrible breakup with your boyfriend and come to work and be like a demon on the spreadsheet. Like, you don't, right? So all these things affect each other, and so it's so important that we start to think about ourselves as whole beings and think about how we're deliberate in bringing our full selves to work. Otherwise, we are really ghosts in the workplace, right? And so I think I hope that I've managed to convince you about the importance of this. And I don't want to do all the talking. So, I've thought about ways, and I've shared with you some ways that I think about this wholeheartedness at work and bringing yourself to work. And one of the suggestions that I had for myself was in really having that discussion with my boss and saying, well, this is what I like to do. How can we incorporate this into work? But I'm sure there are other ways, and we have great minds around the room, and this is something that I struggle with, and I would love to for you to share with us, and maybe this is something that you've thought about as well, about some other ways that we could possibly be more wholehearted and more deliberate in how we bring our full selves to work. Are there any takers? Not all at once. I'm not done. Sneaky. Are there any takers? Thank you, Marley.
I think an important lesson I've learned.
Yes.
An important lesson I've learned, and I try to apply that in my life. And I think that's based from hard lessons learned and mistakes made. I think it's like you said, you have to be whole as a person. You cannot expect work or anything else outside of yourself to make you happy. But the one important lesson I've learned, and I think there are a lot of those individuals here at AFCRI, that it's all about work. And when I did articles, I'm one of your accountants. So when I did articles, the partner that I worked for, he did this analogy, and he said that your personal life and your happiness and who you are is a glass ball. If you drop that, it's very difficult to pick up. But work is a rubber ball. You can play with it, you can change it, you can adopt, you can find out where I fit, what I need to do. But it's a rubber ball. If I drop that ball, I can always pick it up, and it's much easier to pick up that ball and to continue. And I think that's what I try to apply in my life, to not be so focused on work and so focused on getting recognition for what I do on a daily basis, that who I am and the glass ball gets dropped. And then people won't even realize that. It's like you said, they won't even realize that has cracked, that has dropped. And then we focus on this little rubber ball and we keep bouncing. And I think that's just for me, and I can really relate to what you say, to not be so focused on one part and trying to make yourself happy with things outside. I remember last year when we did the 365, Prevan is my boss, and one of the comments were that he would like me to be more sociable. and to that extent, it means I have to spend more time at work. And then I asked him one, I said to him, Prevan, what do you want me to do if I spend more time at work? And he said, no, he's not sure. So I think it is, you say about the balance, but I think it is, you shouldn't be so dependent on work and the gratification and the recognition from others that it's not, there's an emptiness inside. Yeah. It shouldn't be empty inside.
I agree with what you're saying, but then I want to go a step further and say I think work and life are all part of the glass ball, or all part of the rubber ball. Because the difficulty comes in where we're trying to draw a line between this is work and this is me. And I'm not saying be all about work but if you are bringing yourself and bring all your talents and bringing unsociable morally at work, and you're allowed to be yourself, and you're allowed to truly live your full truth at work, it won't feel like, oh, now I have to spend more time, because it just feels like one big continuum that you don't draw the distinction. But if you are forced to then be something because of work, it starts to feel like a chore, you know? Like there are things that I struggle with, like habits that are good, right? But like good in the workplace, but I really, really struggle with. I like to work with a lot of music. I like to, but and that's maybe not conducive for an ordinary workplace. But you need to bring that, because otherwise work starts to feel dreary and like, oh, now I have to go to work. It's me for 8 hours, and then whew, I can start living. And I don't think that is how we should be living our lives. And that's the kind of ghostiness that I'm talking about, because you've literally removed yourself and left it in the car, and then you come.
That's not. But you do get instances in a workplace that the expectation is there. It has to be all about work.
Yeah.
And that's where you as an individual
Yes.
have to say. And I made that mistake when I come from security, where if you left any time before 7 at night, it's like, oh, you're leaving early today. And that's where you as an individual has to say, it's not on.
Yes.
It can't be, this can't be all.
Yes. And that goes to that poem. Remember, anything or anyone that doesn't bring you alive is too small for you. So if it becomes all about work, it means that job is too small for you. It's not bringing you alive, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's easier to change that than to change to become someone that you don't like, that you don't recognize because of.
Exactly. That was great. Is there any more sharing on this side of the room? Audrey? Is that you I see? She looks so eager and like her cheeks are red with enthusiasm. She's looking at me like you're gonna die. Okay, you're safe, Audrey.
It's not more of a question, but it's more of, I don't know if everyone feels the same, because I feel like in corporate culture, whether you, because I'm an extrovert by nature. Like a lot of people know me, I'm conversational. Like I don't mind engaging with people that I don't know. But in terms of corporate culture, it's like sometimes we have a fear of being true to ourselves at work. So that's why sometimes we just create a separation, because we feel like if you bring yourself at work, you'll be judged by people. Like, for example, you'll say, like, sometimes you listen to music when you're at work, and for other people, it'll be like, why is this person listening to music? Isn't he supposed to be working? Yeah. So it comes to a thing of we are afraid of acting to our true nature at work because we are constantly feel like we're judged by other people, our colleagues at work.
But why are we so afraid, right? That to me then says we're not creating safe spaces for each other at work. And I'll come to you, John. So that basically says, I think in this room, the commitment needs to be that we will create safe spaces for each other. So if you do like to talk, I'm not going to say, oh my goodness, he's always in the corridors, but your work is done, right? And I think, or say, gosh, that executive's always with her earphones, gosh, is she, or, but I think we struggle so much to create those safe spaces, largely because we are afraid of maybe revealing our true selves as well, that we might be judged, and that's the difficulty. So for me, that is more an indictment on the environment that you find yourself in than you as a person. So yeah, and maybe if there are thoughts about how to create those safe spaces, because I don't know, right? I would welcome those suggestions. But so I'll come to you. So Jonathan, you had a question or a comment?
More of a comment. I think what happens is we put everything in compartments.
Yeah.
And like Martin mentioned last month, being authentic to yourself, with others, towards others, actually creates that freedom to be yourself. So being real to yourself.
Yes.
And when you put it in different compartments, like you say, you go home and you're a different person because work life and your personal life is supposed to be something different.
Yeah.
And that's what the status quo is all over, and everybody keeps on telling you, keep your personal life away from your work life. Yeah. But like you say, it's actually the same thing. And the more integrated it is, the happier you're going to be.
Yeah.
And like Waldan is saying is you don't get that opportunity because you're constantly thinking about what the next person will say, do, or think of me.
Yeah.
And I think it's that fear where you constantly, sort of, when you walk in the corridors, give that fake smile and then continue. And
is that what that is?
and yeah, you tend to pick it up with people.
Yeah,
fake smile, move on, and that's it. Instead of like Krista would stop and actually ask, "How are you doing?"
Yeah.
And
actually
I don't,
listen to how you're doing.
And I'm not saying spend your time the whole day walking around and asking people how you're doing, but at the end of the day, we need to engage and.
Yes.
If we're true to ourselves, we are going to be interested in what others
exactly
feel, see, think.
Exactly. But Jonathan raises an interesting point. So I think, yes, bring yourself, but there's such thing as oversharing, right? So I'm not saying come and be like, oh my God, I so wasted yesterday, and like, there's a line, right? And I think it's a fine line, but so that's what I'm talking. I'm not saying bring your full self, because if I had to bring my full self, I wouldn't have a job. So you bring enough, not like your full. Sorry. Sorry, we haven't met. Maybe just mention your name.
My name is Mariet.
Hi, Maria.
And what I wanted to say is that I think the problem with everybody, for most of us, is that we actually don't take the time to get to know ourselves, to be able to be at work, to be the full self that you are. Because a lot of times what we are doing is not what our passions are. And mostly a lot of us don't actually know what was our passions. Like you say, when you start to study, you actually don't know who you really are and what your real passion in life is. And mostly when we are afraid is that we don't want people to see the real us. And that's why we will have fakeness here, and we will have people that will be looking to what other people are doing to better ourselves. And that is why you get people that go and break other people down. Whereas when you are fulfilled within yourself, you will rather go and pick up people than to break them down. And if all of us can just take that time to go and really be truthfully honest with ourselves and find our true self, we will be more fulfilled, and we will actually be able to change the world and to change our workspace.
No, I love that point, because, and it goes to that poem where I think Maurice, you had a point, but it goes to the part of the poem that I read, that it's, you need to go into the darkness and be in that sweet confinement of your own aloneness to find out who you really are. Because I think, Mariette, a lot of people aren't doing it to be mean, they just don't know, like you said. And I think we're afraid to stop and really look at ourselves for the flawed creatures that we are, warts and all. And so we almost project on other people because we actually haven't found ourselves. And so, and so this whole metaphor about the darkness that I was talking about goes exactly to that. And so I think if more of us did that, we would really know who we are and face ourselves as we really are, right? But okay, so we'll come to you and then go to Maurice. Or is it a burning? She's basically bouncing on the chair.
No, I actually wanted to say the same thing as Mariette. My motto in life is you need to find out what fills your bucket. Because if your bucket is full, you won't even worry about the other people's buckets. You'll actually see theirs is empty. Like, people fills my bucket. So I said to my husband the other day, me and Thabi is going on a girls' night because my bucket's empty.
Yes, we are. We're Ubering, so we can go all out.
No, so I think other people actually drain their bucket or empties their bucket. So if you just can find out what fills your bucket and what boosts your energy levels, then you'll be an all-rounder, happy wherever you are.
Yeah, and it's about finding what's big enough for your spirit, right? What brings you alive, because things that don't bring you joy are ultimately too small for you. And so, it goes exactly to that what is it, what kind of activities, what kind of things are big enough for your spirit so that you can fill your bucket. Thanks, Maurice.
One question I had, hi, I'm Sbu, by the way.
Hi, Sbu.
Was what was your boss's reaction when you breached the topic, one, and then the other one is, what if you faced within a space where you what you have as you had that development and your passion for that, for example, let's say what you then have is something that somewhat is unrelated to whatever it is that you're doing. So how do you then breach that and then bring that more across? Or do you then do it outside of the workplace? And then with that being said, how do you, and it goes back to the balance thing a bit, but how are you bringing yourself fully to whatever it is that your side thing is, as well as what you come do on a 9 to 5, if that makes any sense?
Yes.
Like if you have, for example, you were studying and you had to do your MBA, how do you find that balance within yourself to say, okay, I'm giving everything here, but I'm still giving everything to the MBA, and I'm giving, do you know what I mean? So those are the two questions.
Okay. So to the first question, when I broached the topic with him, I mean, Chris joked, he was like, "Oh, you really like taking liberties," but I think so. He joked, but what I painted to him was a compelling case about, if I do this, this will be my contribution here, and almost showing him the benefits of me being a fuller person. Either it is through the networks that you build, or it is through the kind of insights that you can now bring to the team. So that was the conversation that I had, and it wasn't one conversation. It literally was a series of things where he kind of shared, and it opens up the door for him to tell you, this is how I thought you were. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not really what I like. And he's like, oh, okay. So it becomes a relationship building type of conversation where you should be able to articulate the value that your purpose brings. Because I think when you are bringing your full self, there is value in that. And it's up to you to kind of find it and link it to the work that you know so well. On the second point, it's a difficult one, because if you are, I don't know, an internal auditor, but your passion is nightclub DJing full-time or whatever, those can seem very, very incompatible. But the decision is up to you to make. You know what your superpowers are. You know what brings you alive. Do you feel that what you do does not bring you? I mean, that's a decision that you need to make for yourself. I do think that things that seem incompatible at first can be very compatible through doing them. But it's up to you to think, is this thing draining me to such an extent that I'm not able to live a full life? And that's a very difficult call to make, and I think every one of us has our own personal views, and it's your personal circumstance, but it's about what brings you alive, what is big enough, and if what you're doing is not big enough, that's something that you need to navigate.
Okay. Just a comment. I think pivotal to all of this is working with someone who is open and understanding. So you bringing your full self means bringing them into a bit more than just what you come to do to work. And you need to be able to trust that your manager understands, and they're not going to judge you in a weird way about whatever it is that you're thinking after that. And so, I think just the point to make would be that it's not so easy when you don't trust that it's a safe space. And I guess it's important to bring back what you said earlier, that maybe we should be talking about how do we build this safer space, and so that people can actually bring their full selves to work.
Yeah. Oh, there's one more question. Do we need to wrap up? Hey? Oh, okay. Okay.
I think if you're happy with what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
That is so true. I actually should have Googled that one. Yeah. Damn.
And that being said, you can't come to work expecting to come to work with a heart saying, oh, one more day to pension.
Yeah.
Because then you're never going to be happy.
Yeah.
Your happiness is depending on you yourself.
Yeah.
If you come to work and you make it happy for yourself, you can't say, oh, my boss did this today, so I'm unhappy. You can't come to work because you and your husband had a fight and say, oh, it's the work that's wrong. So if you want to be happy, it has to start with you. And happiness starts with the people that you surround yourself with and the choices that you make in your life. Yeah. Then you'll be happy in your workplace and at home as well.
No, that is so true. I love that. Yeah, that is a great quote that I quite enjoy. So, you know, I think we've come almost full circle in terms of this topic about asking ourselves, are you a ghost in the workplace? And I think we're all clear about what I mean by that. You know, it's about hollowing out who you are and then coming to work. So that's basically what we've spoken about today. That is what I hope that we've reflected on through this discussion. And the lesson that I've taken away for myself is the need to create safer spaces and the need to surround yourself with people who give you the flexibility to bring your full self without judgment. And I think that's something that we all need to strive for. So I've had a wonderful time chatting to all of you. Thank you for coming on the day before a long weekend. I'm hoping that at least the people in this room will not be haunting our other colleagues. It'll take time, but we'll get there. Thank you so much. Enjoy the holiday. Thank you so much.